Once there were two old friends who shared a passion for golf, and they played every day after they retired, never got tired of the game. And as they aged and had to think about death and what comes after death, they started to wonder, of course, whether there would be golf in heaven. And this became a very important concern for them. And so they made a deal. Phil said to George, let's try whoever goes first to contact the one who's still alive and let them know whether there's golf in heaven. Well, Phil died first, and about a week later, George had a dream. When Phil appeared to him, and George said, "Phil, is that you?" Phil said, "Yeah, I've got good news. There's golf in heaven, and it's not just golf. There are limitless courses that are much better and finer and more wonderful than any on earth, and the equipment is absolutely heavenly." That's great news. But I got some bad news, George. We have a tea time at 9 o'clock tomorrow. Everybody wants to go to heaven, but no one wants to die. When asked about what Unitarian Universalists believe about life after death, there is no one answer, because the beliefs about immortality among Unitarian Universalists vary widely. Really, the best answer is this: Unitarian Universalists have different views about life after death, but we do believe in life after birth. And our faith is centered around making the most of this life. The core of our faith is this life, making the most of this life, making the most of the potential that we have for our individual lives and growth, for our families and communities. There is heaven in that. So we don't have a particular teaching to guide us as we speculate about what happens on the other side of this veil we call death, except for one, and that is that there is nothing to fear. Our Universalist ancestors did believe in immortality, but the one thing they did not believe in was a hell of everlasting punishment. They believed that no one would be left behind. They believed that God's love was so powerful and great that all people would be saved, accepted, redeemed. And modern Unitarian Universalists have taken this idea to heart, accepting this life and knowing that living in this life to the best of our ability, to the edge of our potential, is heaven enough. But we do have various ideas about what might happen after death. Many opinions. You have ideas, I have ideas. I kind of suspect that there is something different, and it might be several kinds of things. That's my speculation. But I don't know. And I won't know till later, maybe. That doesn't keep us from responding in a healthy way to loss and grief and bereavement. One of the things that people who are new to Unitarian Universalism and experience us first through attending a memorial service conducted in a Unitarian Universalist congregation, are impressed by the way that we celebrate life. They may have come from a tradition where the final rites for a deceased person have more to do with the spiritual future of the people in the pew, or maybe something that's simply read out of a book. But we celebrate the life of each person. We celebrate their contribution. We celebrate what they have left behind. We acknowledge what it is that we miss, and we are grateful for what it is that will continue to live among us and within us. And that's inspiring, not only to those in this congregation as we say goodbye to the people we love, but to others whose first exposure to our Unitarian Universalist faith might be these memorial services where we have affirmed the life of the person who has died. In my experience in ministry, there's not that much difference in how people face death, whether they believe in an afterlife or not, with one exception. If people have been brought up to believe that there is such a thing as hell and eternal punishment, then that can cause a great deal of fear in those final moments. Our Universalist forebears are right. That doctrine of eternal punishment is an evil one. We can't really know what happens after death. Some of us think we do, but we really can't know. The evidence isn't there. It's a great mystery what is beyond that curtain of death. Many Unitarian Universalists feel that the individual consciousness ends at death, that we simply cease to exist, cease to feel, cease to hear, to understand, that there is nothingness, just as there was nothing to be afraid of either. I think maybe Mark Twain put it best when he said, "I do not fear death. I had been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born, and I had not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it." It would be like it was before we were ever conceived. There was a consciousness, there was a personality and a body, and then there isn't. Now, this isn't really that scary if you think about the fact that we go there every single night when we go into deep sleep, when consciousness goes away completely. And then we wake up again. And then there's another state, too, where we dream that feels real in between, and then we wake up again. So we're actually quite familiar with this place of deep peace and rest. And those who believe that that is the end of our individual being see no reason to fear. As the British physicist and author Stephen Hawking said in a recent interview, "I regard the brain as a computer which will stop working when its components fail. There is no heaven or afterlife for broken down computers. That is a fairy story for people afraid of the dark." But this belief that our individual life and existence ends with death is not the only one that Unitarian Universalists hold. There are Unitarian Universalists who do believe in some kind of existence, a positive existence, like a kind of heaven after death. These folks, in my experience, tend to be people who have actually had what has been termed a near-death experience. And most of them, after having had an experience where may have been clinically dead and then have come back to consciousness, no longer fear death. This is not universal, but most people who have had that experience feel that it was real somehow. And we understand that there's the whole idea of entering a tunnel and a realm of light and peace, and perhaps meeting a holy figure or some other deceased loved ones. Now, the description of a near-death experience that people who have survived them talk about is remarkably similar to the first few chapters of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. But if you follow the rest of the plot in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, you see that where people go is not a heaven, but reincarnation into a new body. A friend and congregant, I was visiting a friend and congregant who was dying and had several conversations, and we had a very good and frank relationship. He told me that he was pretty sure, he was actually certain, that there was nothing on the other side of death, that there was no consciousness, no individual life. And I said, well, I'm not absolutely sure, but we made a deal. And if he was surprised, that he would somehow let me know. I haven't heard from him yet, but I haven't given up. Reincarnation is actually the theory of an afterlife that most people on the globe believe in. And there's actually some evidence for that. And people don't want to take that in. But the psychiatrist Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia, who's actually for a time the chair of that department of psychiatry at the University of Virginia, has studied and his colleagues have studied over 3,000 children who claim to remember something of their past lives. And then Stevenson and his colleagues gathered those details and then tracked them down and found a remarkable similarity with over 3,000 of these cases with someone who had recently died. That's pretty amazing. Most of you have heard of Carl Sagan, a humanist, someone who did not believe in any kind of higher power, someone who was viciously opposed to a lot of New Age thinking. He was asked in an interview, is there anything about New Age thinking that you think might have some validity? He said, there is some intriguing evidence about reincarnation that we should be looking at further. But you know, we Westerners really misunderstand this concept of reincarnation. We think, because we're such good consumers, that we get to pick. We get to be like a dog or something. That's not the case. And it's important, too, to realize that among Hindus and among different kinds of Buddhists, there are very different views of what reincarnation is. For Hindus, there is an individual soul that takes more bodies. And for Buddhists, there's no identity that gets reincarnated. It's simply a set of tendencies. But reincarnation is not good news. It means you have to go through the whole thing again until you finally get it and let go of the suffering that's attached to human life. The goal is liberation. The goal is liberation from the individual personality, the individual ego. It's not a self-abnegation. but a change of perspective. So all of this is speculative. Hints. This or that, evidence or not. We don't know. One thing I do know, there is immortality. The Buddha said that we own nothing but our deeds, and our deeds, for good or ill, live on after us. They continue to influence the world long after we are gone. The view of the great mystics in all times and places is that there is no essential difference between us, each individual person, and that great creative force or process from which we come. There is no separation between us and the source of all that is. As Western mystics would say, we are one with God. Our true identity is not this body that is born and dies, this personality with its limitations and gifts. Our true identity is being itself. Let's look at it this way, with an ancient metaphor. A wave arises out of the ocean. The wave is beginning to feel its power, its strength. It exults in its being as a wave, joining the other wave, surging powerfully toward the shore until it sees in the distance the annihilation of its brothers and sister waves as they crash upon the beach. And then the wave is afraid. The wave does not realize is that it's simply a manifestation of the ocean. In the same way, we are manifestations of that which is greater than all of us and out of which all of us come. And during special moments in our lives, we can have deep and true experiences of that. The more we live in the eternal now, the more we may understand that eternity is not endless time. That seems boring to me too. But timelessness, because the future is only a thought in the present, and the past is only a thought in the present. Time is an invention, a thought. The Vietnamese Zen master talks about the leaf. The leaf in the autumn has lost its color, its chlorophyll, its function. The leaf is dying. It's about to fall and decay. But the leaf isn't sad. The leaf is happy because it knows that when it falls and decays, it will nurture the tree, rise in the sap of the tree, and become the tree and the leaves on the tree, that it is always and forever part of the tree, just as we are always and forever part of this world, part of this universe. The more awake we are, the more we see that this personality and body are a prison that we can walk out of anytime we want by paying attention now to this moment. And death and the remembrance of death can bring us fully into life. We fear death if we know we haven't lived. We fear death if we know that we haven't made the most of this precious gift of life or lived for the wrong things. Death can now bring us fully into life. So I don't know exactly what happens after death. I do know it is nothing to be afraid of. I do know that we can't fall out of the universe, even when we die. Great mysteries are hard to talk about in prose and propositions. The poets have it. They have the last word. As Walt Whitman said, "What do you think has become of the young and old men? What do you think has become of the women and children? They are alive and well somewhere. The smallest sprout shows there really is no death, and if ever there was, it let forward life and does not wait at the end to arrest it, and ceased the moment life appeared. All goes outward and outward. Nothing collapses, and to die is different from what anyone supposed, and luckier." Amen. May it be so.